This episode of Planted is brought to you by Yorma's Choice.
The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Planted with Sara Payan podcast. I'm Sara Payan, your host, and today we have two of my absolute favorite people, Jim Roberts and Brian Adkinson of the Bohemian Chemist, and also of the Madrones and the Brambles. And I am so excited to have you both here today. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely.
We're having us.
Yeah. I mean, we're fans of the podcast for sure. It's my listening time when I'm out in the garden and planting, and we're fans of you on a personal level too. So thank you for inviting us.
Oh, you keep them company in the cannabis garden.
I love that. It is one of the highest compliments when I hear that I'm listened to in the garden. It's funny. I knew of the two of you before we met, and of the Bohemian Chemist, and part of it is because I'm a big old weed nerd, and and your work with rare land races, rare cannabinoids and land races, and collecting those, and just how you get very scientific, and you've not only do people who use cannabis recreationally enjoy what you put out, but you're also still very connected to this part of the science and also the medicinal side. And those are things that are near and dear to my heart. And then, of course, for those of you listening out there, if you've ever looked at some of my social media and you've seen this big, beautiful apothecary wall in the pictures that just looks like it's out of like some old world, I don't know what. It's just gorgeous. That is also one of the reasons that I was like, I have to go visit them. And then we did meet, this winter we all met, and we didn't run out of things to even talk about. It was like, I felt like I knew you both, and it was just, it was very magical because I was like,
It was a 10-hour dinner party. It was quite fun.
Well, before that, I came up with a creative team and we had a great talk. But then we had the 10-hour dinner party. And that was even better. But before we get into all of that and talking about that magical place that the two of you are so lucky to take such good care of, what was your first cannabis experience for both of you?
So mine was, I started out early. So I was around 15 years old. I grew up in Southern California, and I hung out with some people that were kind of from the hippie generation. So this is back in the late 70s, early 80s, because I'm pretty old. But anyway, so it was a whole different world there. And I think, friends of ours kind of introduced me to cannabis, and his brother had a beach house down in Laguna Beach, and I think my first smoking was down there, and then we sat up on the top of a place called I think it was called the White House, and it was a jazz place, and we looked down and smoked on the roof and watched everybody down below because we were underage, and so that was just really fond memories. And then I had a little opium den, which was an old like maid's quarters that was on an old property with a Spanish house on it, and my mom was fine with me partaking, but she said just stick close to home, and don't venture out. So that was pretty much my first experience.
And to clarify, I don't think you smoked opium.
No,
opium
we just called it.
Yeah.
Good clarification. Kids don't smoke opium.
Right. Exactly. So she was pretty liberal that way, and she actually grew our first plant. So we were still in high school, and she was just an avid gardener, and our pediatrician had seeds, and back in those times it was probably from Thai sticks or something like that. And she planted them in the yard and grew these enormous plants, and we chopped them down in the middle of the night when we got a little scared. But
they got paranoid.
Yeah. Rolled them off a hill up in the hill somewhere.
I was a late bloomer. I grew up in the just say no generation, so I was very just say no to everything until I got into my 20s. Yeah. And I think my first cannabis experience, I remember it very distinctly. I was at a hotel called La Tida's in Key West at Key West Fantasy Fest. with a group of friends of mine. And anyway, they're like, Brian, it's so much fun. You've got to try it. You've got to do this with us. And so I did. And it just, opened up a world of fun for me. It became, it really became part of really integrated into our day-to-day life. In that, like, every Sunday, what we did is we would get together in the morning and we would listen to Morrissey, and we would smoke weed. And then by the evening, we would head to a restaurant called Pizzeria Uno's, and we'd order pizzas with strawberry daiquiris or frozen margaritas. And that would be the end of the Sunday experience. But it was, it was this great way to connect with my friends on a whole other level. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then you just said yes.
Yes, I just said yes, exactly.
And I grew up right in the Reagan era and the AIDS crisis, so I always said yes. Probably with my middle finger.
I love it.
Not a big fan of them.
Yeah. I just remember the whole, like, the DARE thing. My cousin, who's much younger than me, she was like my niece, and she ended up getting strep throat. She had to take, I think it was penicillin or something like that. And she was like, say no to drugs. I can't take it, Mom. It's like, wow, the messaging, it got a little skewed.
Right. That whole egg in the frying pan, it really scared me for a long time.
I can understand that. But, I'm saying, the Morrissey and the daiquiris, we would have been hanging out.
I was a little bit more Neil Young, but I get it.
Okay.
I like Morrissey too.
I love
Neil
it.
Young and Billie Holiday, we were going retro those days. So yeah, definitely. But that was a great beginning, and for us, for me, I came out early. And in my early 20s, I was out up in Northern California, and that was actually really at the start of the AIDS crisis too. So I was still an avid smoker, not as much as I was maybe when I was a little bit younger, but then it was, we were actually procuring cannabis for friends that were suffering and other friends that had cancer and that sort of thing. So it just brought a whole another dynamic onto it when it came to actually health and wellness and the therapeutics behind it too. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people may not realize that the two of you, weren't immersed in the cannabis industry from the get-go. I mean, of course, your mom had been cultivating, but you both had really rich careers before you even got into cannabis. And Jim, if I recall, you actually mentioned once when we were talking that letting people know that you were working in cannabis was almost like a second coming out.
Oh, absolutely. Because I had a career. I went into design. My family had a design business, and then I kind of followed through with that. I was an artist for quite a while, especially down in Laguna Beach in Hawaii. But took that route, and then my mom was when she got older, she picked it back up and started cultivating again. So I was always very supportive. But being up in the area that we're in, we remember the camp raids and everything that was going on in our neighbors and that sort of thing. So I always kept it pretty quiet and just we were pretty insulated and would help her in the garden. But when I decided to actually take over the farm, and that part of the growing, I did kind of come out again, and that was just in kind of very similar. It was almost like post-traumatic stress, because I felt the things I felt during coming out as a gay man during the early 80s and actually the AIDS crisis and how you were stigmatized and it just all the awful stuff. And I saw that all over again up here, and then became really familiar with farmers, and families and just how their suffering was going on, and just to see the abuse. And I guess to my advantage, I could keep my foot in two different worlds because I was respected as a person in the community doing other things, and a large employer when I had my design business. So I kind of went toe to toe with our supervisors and others that were really causing a lot of harm within our community. And but it was hard. It really felt very hard because I felt like once I did that, I felt I was looked at differently from a large part of the community, and it was just really tough. It almost erased all the good that you've done, and people want to box people in, So, but we persevered.
Yeah, we did. And it was shame producing. You and I have really worked hard to amass what we have. And what was interesting to me is that when we started to get into the cannabis industry, or when we disclosed the fact that Rosemary had been in the cannabis industry, suddenly for many people, the paradigm shifted from us being hard workers that really amassed this
businesses and everything.
Businesses and stuff, right? The paradigm shift from us being these hard workers to, they got all that just because they grew cannabis. Right. And growing cannabis is very hard work, so interestingly enough. Yeah. And then the other thing is that that's not how we amassed that. We got into cannabis later, but it was just the way people's attitude shifted has been a heavy lift for us. Yeah. But I see more and more it's starting to be very accepted with crowds that we never thought it would be accepted with before, especially those people that we live around that are in the wine industry. Mm-hmm. They've really decided that, wait a minute, this is maybe another opportunity for us instead of looking at it as this competitive industry.
Yeah. So. Even when we travel, we make a point, at least I do. We went to Greece over the summer, and people ask you what you do, and I put it right out there, and that's a country that it's not legal in, and I get the reaction at first. They don't really want to talk about it, and then they kind of digest it, and 20 minutes later, they're saying, so tell me more about this, what is it, what is it all about? And I think that's our opportunity right there to normalize, so every time we bring it up and not be fearful of it, and to get back out from under being in the shadows. And I think really bringing that out and having the conversations with people that really may have some preconceived notions or may actually have no involvement in the cannabis community, and to let them know. And I think our background, since we started in the medical space or medicinal space, that's actually really good for us as a starter too, as far as actually the benefits, the therapeutics that are behind it. The plant's being used for medicine for thousands of years, and so if you start talking about these sorts of things, and I think people start to shift a little bit and their eyes open and they want to know more, which is great.
And Jim is on a mission to let everybody know.
Absolutely.
The taxi cab driver from the airport, the Uber driver, the waitress in the restaurant, the nurse practitioner that we meet at a medical appointment, the person in the waiting room that's sitting next to us, everybody knows that we're in the cannabis industry.
Out and proud.
Yes. No more shame here.
I love it. Yeah, that's very much like Jeff. I'll bring up conversations and talk to people. I kind of feel it out a little bit. Not as much as I used to, though, because you used to have to be really a little bit more careful. I remember being in an Uber coming back from work one night, and he asked me, what do you do? And I said, well, I work at a cannabis dispensary. And he's like, oh, so you're a drug dealer? I'm like, no, pharmaceutical salespeople are drug dealers.
Yeah. Perfect. And exactly.
And he's like, oh. But isn't it funny, though, when you think about when you started and how people looked at it, and now, especially with how passionate you are with your work and people knowing, your work ethic and the way that, you go about learning and sharing that information. Now people, I know for me, this is how, and I'm only imagining that you get this even more. The people before who didn't necessarily want to have the conversations are now like, so I'm curious.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about especially with the non-euphorics? I hear there are non-euphoric ways of using cannabis, and then later on it's well, I wonder what it would be like if I tried a little THC.
Yeah, and I think our end.
We see that at the hotel,
which
all the time.
Is a really good example because we. And I'll let Brian talk about it a little bit, but we basically had a crowd that was coming in, and we had 4 wine tasting rooms on the property, and then when we decided to do the apothecary, which is what you mentioned earlier, and then it launched with a brand actually coming out of 215 into 64, we decided we had to do it in a really tasteful manner that we didn't want to lose our crowd that we already had there. But it's funny. So
they've been when they initially check in, the innkeeper will kind of orient them to the property, and she'll let them know where the dispensary is if they want to stop in there. And a lot of folks when they first check in are like, oh no, we're fine. We don't do that, And then usually it'll be one spouse or the other. They don't come in together. One person in the couple will come in without the other one and be like, I haven't done this since high school, and I'm just kind of curious about what it would be like. And so, and then we have Keela, who's our brand ambassador that's in our store.
And Debbie. Yeah.
And Debbie, and they do a fantastic job in educating people. And so, yeah, a lot of times by the end of the weekend, both spouses have been in the dispensary. They've got bags of product, and they're headed home, and they're sold on this experience. And that's with our travel customers. Yeah. With a lot of the, and this is mainly, I would say, a lot of the elderly locals, that we have that visit our store. We have tons of people that come in for pain and sleep.
Right.
And being in the mental health milieu prior to this, I can say with no reservations that sleep is incredibly important. And there's nothing that I've ever taken that is as effective in terms of keeping me asleep as cannabis. It has been a real lifesaver for me. I have terminal insomnia, so I wake up at 3 a.m., wide awake, ready to write a book report or something, And,
wow, all right.
And cannabis has really allowed me to get the amount of sleep that I need without any kind of hangover or residual effect or side effect that all those sleeping medications have that just weren't good for me.
So we would have people pop in and say, my shoulder's hurting, or, I'm having trouble sleeping, or I tried it in high school, but then I had a bad brownie experience, that sort of thing. So I think part of it that we really want to enter the space is that we were not doing this for financial gain necessarily. We would love to earn a living, but that's about it for us. It's more of a passion that we have. And we want to make sure that those folks have a really good experience. So it's instilled in all of our staff too. So that, and also when we go out on the road too, we're interested in the emerging market. We're interested in the folks that actually I have not been daily users for decades. Not that we're not interested in those folks, but we're really interested in the folks that could actually benefit from some of the therapeutics. And when I think of medicine, I think of heart medicine. I think of physical medicine. I think of spiritual medicine. I think of medicine for the mind. And I think that there's all these different categories that cannabis can address this. And we want to make sure that those first experiences that people have are really positive ones. So I think dosing is super important and just being very measured. So I think, and as a community, I feel like we have that responsibility. And I find that with the legacy growers up here, that's what I love so much about this community and why I want them to stay relevant in this market that's gotten kind of clobbered by an oligopoly of large corporations. These people up here actually have decades and institutional knowledge of what they're doing and generational knowledge and genetics and they have a true love for the plant and the spirit of the plant. And I think that really needs to be celebrated. So we do a lot of advocacy work and a lot of pro bono stuff to actually help our other fellow farmers up here and which is super important.
One of those being our cannabis farmers markets that are on the third Sunday of every month at the Madrone's property. So we have several different farmers from the area that rotate in. You can talk to the actual farmer that grows this, which is exciting for folks. And then, go in the Bohemian Chemist shop and purchase, additional items. So it's a great way that we can really support the farmers in our community that really need help right now.
Absolutely. And we've also hosted for Swami and VP with Swami Select. They've been kind of spearheading a live auction that's actually every year. They're going to be doing a silent auction this year at the property, but we've donated our venue at the Brambles for them to raise money, and they've done it for such lovely causes. It's mental health was one of the first ones. I think the Land Trust was another one that they did. So.
And they're doing a quieter, silent auction this year. We're not doing the big auction event, but the third Sunday in July at the Madrones, we're also going to be doing the cannabis auction. Yeah. So Nikki and Swami will be there, and in addition to several other growers, it'll be a more expanded market. Yeah. And they'll be auctioning off different experiences and items in a silent auction forum. So
and that will go towards, proceeds will go towards nonprofits, which is amazing.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Discover the power of Yorma's Choice CBD products. When we chose a sober life, we searched for the best CBD to manage our chronic pain. In Raywood, Kentucky, the home of Bickett and Boone, we found the perfect solution. Yorma's Choice is a range of topicals, tinctures, bath salts, and gummies. Choose Yorma's Choice for pain-free living. Shop now at furpeaceranch.com. FURPEACERANCH.com.
I mean, and that really echoes what we were doing in the 215 days. Really looking at not only, creating safe access, but supporting the community, which I think in some ways has been largely forgotten by the greater industry. It's a really interesting thing because I feel very lucky that I got in when I did during the medicinal times, because like you, I'm a very community focused person, and looking at community care was what really got me into cannabis, because as much as I am very happy that we have adult use cannabis and that people aren't going to jail for using it recreationally, it hasn't been really the thing that's caught my heart and mind as much as how do we help people, have alternatives for when they're ill, or creating balance in their bodies, and how do we use this for the greater good of the community? And you've carried that on, and it's really something special, because there's a huge difference between going into a retail location where it's bright and everything's packaged and nobody seems to know much about what they're working with. And I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but there's a lot of that formula retail, get them in, get them out, highest THC percentage, and it's just gotten a little soulless in a lot of places.
Sure.
And so to go into and I always call it a little jewel box of a dispensary. It really is. It's like, I remember walking in the first time and just being like, if I ever had a dispensary, this is what I would want it to be like.
We didn't say that. Yeah.
You should talk about where you got it.
I found, so I'm a big person. I follow a lot of auctions, and my family had also antique businesses at some point. So I thought, when we did the branding for the chemist, we found a guy in London to do our branding, and we really wanted to go back to like the 1920s. So I sought out this cabinetry that had been in the same family. It was an old pharmacy out of Hungary that had been in the same family since 1910. And it was just amazing. I said, okay, let's just get it all. We'll figure out what we can do with it, because that's my background anyway, when we get it here. And it was such a joy to get it, and actually to kind of have fun putting it together, different than it was put together in the original space. We wanted it to be like almost like a little cigar counter off the lobby, so of the property, and just it's something very approachable and warm. And so I appreciate you saying that. Yeah.
Well, and where did you get the light fixture? It came from a restaurant in Berkeley.
Right? Yeah. So that came from the old Spinnakers that was actually at Berkeley. So I got that in auction too. I'm a junk collector. What can I say? I scavenge, junkyards and auctions and stuff like that. So that's half the fun, is finding these things and figuring out, okay, what are we going to do with them? So that part's been great. The branding's been great. We've done, work we've done on the branding, and working with our packaging designer and kind of doing the art direction for it. It's been just a lot of fun for the whole line. Yeah, definitely.
And I wanted to touch on too, Jim talked a while ago about the emerging market, and we were talking a lot about the medical space for cannabis. But also in terms of the emerging market, something that we're working with our guests, or Keela is working with our guests on, is, we'll let people know, like, oh, you're going to go for a hike in Hendy Woods. Well, you should really, smoke some of the giant. It's like the trees are going to seem, bigger.
How is that possible? They're huge.
Right. Yeah.
I know, but we had the giant.
Right. Or even, talk a little bit about how we pair wine with a meal. Weed with a meal, or weed with wine. You know what I mean? And using those terpenes and everything to really, so you can have these experiences as a traveler that cannabis can really enhance and make it an even better experience.
And it's fun. We all, every once in a while, we really like to get, stoned and actually or go to a place that's very high. I love doing that, but on a daily basis, or just to actually, and as you get older too, it's just, we don't want to be serving Everclear. We don't want to be serving shots of tequila all the time. We want something that's actually going to, so we have a lot of stuff that's very low in THC. We don't chase THC. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of stuff that's actually kind of in more moderate THC. We also don't think, THC it's just part of it. The plant has 500 different chemical compounds in it, hundreds of terpenes, and so much we probably don't even know. So, so that's kind of driven a little bit of what we've been doing at the farm, as far as what we're doing as far as breeding, and then what we're doing as far as actually preservation work. and really hunting out really rare stuff too. That because I feel like those older cultivars, you talk to the old timers, they had trace amounts of minors in them, and they had they may have lower THCs in the teens, but they could get you just as to the place you want to go as anything that's out there that's over 30%. You know all this, so it's it's I'm thinking, okay, what made those special, because I remember I got busted at Disneyland with my first Thai sticks, so I was pissed. But when I was in 1980, I was actually still I hate to say it, I'm not a proponent of people underage smoking, but I mean I was for sure. And it was special, and you go back and you think, okay, was it special because of the time in my life or where I was, or was it special because there was something special about the plant that seems to be lost right now? And I think it's probably a combination of both. But I feel like with all the polyhybrids that are out there, we just keep breeding and breeding and breeding. And we're breeding for cosmetics. And I said it's kind of like a plastic surgery. We're breeding for these beautiful buds. And
yield.
Yeah. And yield and early finishing. And almost everything we're growing is like late harvest, sativas that have long flowering cycles. And we get them started in February. Maybe we're even harvesting into December, so that's a long cycle. We just got the plants in the ground and they're already almost 5 feet tall.
Wow.
And I had 500 of them growing this year in a tiny little greenhouse, but they've got their feet in the ground at this point. So it's that's kind of sent me on that quest, because I was like, gosh, I just things seemed a little different. So I think you go back and like we got Punto Royo going this summer, and we've got like a Corinto. These are actually all South American and Oaxacan gold. And you talk to people and they say, I think there's a little bit of CBC in that. There's some THCV and there's some CBG, and then we have a Panama Red that's been bred out by another breeder who's really well known, and it's got CBD in it. So it's actually got a pretty strong CBD count in it. And he's worked for years on it, so we've got that going in the garden too. So that's been a fun exploration. And then to be able to actually kind of work closely with some scientists and MDs also, and especially ones that are actually practicing cannabis medicine, that are in the medical community, and to say we can't find this and I can't find that. And like, okay, I'm going to grow that then, and let's see if we can get it in your area so you can actually have your patients have something that they want to. That you think is going to be beneficial, and that has to do with terpenes. It has to do with different cannabinoid profiles and ratios, and then we're trying to breed out something that's very full spectrum. So my ideal plant's going to have THC in it at a nice amount, but also either CBG, maybe 2 or 3 different other minors, also that are going to really support that and create a synergistic effect. So that's all exciting stuff. But this old stuff is like the key. And then if we do the preservation work here, we're going to be able to keep those genetics going. And then, because at one point, people are going to say, we're already saying that we've lost so much. We've lost so much genetics, with all the, not only wars around the world, but also just the war on drugs here and bust and people's, having a fire or whatever. And it's like, it's so important for us to be preserving this stuff because we're going to want it. It's just like, this is a toolbox here that, we're going to want to be able to use down the road. We're using it right now. And so we're just trying to build up our toolbox so that we can share that. And then maybe also, I think people that are partaking a lot right now, we always tell our bud tenders, they said, try this, try something. I know, don't look at the THC percentages, don't worry about any of that, but just try it because it actually has some minors in there and some other stuff. And the effects are very profound. They're different. And we're getting such good response on that. We're like, oh my gosh, I haven't had anything like that. And it's just very exciting. So I think that's, even though it looks kind of foxtelly or the bud's got really a weird structure to it and all that, I said, don't judge a bud by its cover,
It's true though. It's so true because that was also like why I used to judge outdoor grown, sun-grown cannabis, because you get these indoor grown buds that would be just so pristine and beautiful and compact. And you're like, oh, wow. I mean, that's not the stuff I grew up with. I grew up with the stuff that you had to clean before you used it. You're going to get all the seeds and everything.
Totally.
Wow. I just totally aged myself. But it's like, then you really experience a really well cultivated sun-grown bud, and you're like, wow, this is different. And, talking to friends who has smoked for many years, one of the biggest things that I hear is, oh, everything's so strong today. It makes me paranoid. I don't know what to do. And it's like, well, seek out growers that are looking at, legacy genetics or more that have a fuller spectrum. And you'll find that you have a much more balanced feeling. You're not going to be getting that paranoia or that feeling too high. And I think that, there's a lot to be said for everybody trying that. But I gotta say, like, when I worked in a dispensary, like, whenever I'd get something like pressed hash or like the occasional, Colombian gold, something, like, especially guys of a certain generation, it's like you just saw like the eyes open, everything got really twinkly. Like, ooh, let me see what that is, And I think that I think people chase the latest and greatest, but I think we are starting to get to a point where people are looking at it with a little bit more connoisseurship, and they're like, wait a minute, like, these vintage genetics, it's just kind of like, and I hate to make the association, but it really is like one of the easiest ways to describe it. But just like with wines, like when we look at, wines in California, there are cash crop grapes. And then there are things like what the Rhone Rangers did, where they're looking at grapes that actually do really well in the environment in which they're grown. They're built for those appellations. And I think, having those conversations and turning people on to that. And, I remember like when we did our trip up to see you the first time, we'd been gifted some gummies, and they were rich in CBC. And I was like, wow, okay. So I know CBC, like in theory, like on my charts of the cannabinoids and what they do, but I've never ingested it. Like, what is that going to do? And being able to kind of geek out on that is a lot of fun. But, going back to just, what you're doing on the farm, and also, where tourism is a big thing. You're in the Anderson Valley, and you have you have the madrones and you have the brambles. And when I went in this last time, I had purchased some infused Epsom salts, because you had a great bathtub in the room that we were in. Yeah.
We were in the perch, I think.
We were in the perch. And it was really nice, because it was very, we got there, we did some wine tasting, we went out for dinner, and then because of where we were in that redwood grove, we opened up the windows in our bedroom, and it was like forest bathing. It's like you took a bath, did a little forest bathing, just felt like it was just a retreat from everything in the city. And it was just it was one of those things where even with or without the cannabis, I was coming home feeling refreshed and renewed. And there's just so much in that beautiful place that we still talk about it. Like every time that Jeff and I go out somewhere, Jeff will be like, we went to go visit our friends in the Anderson Valley, and they have this really cool place that you've got to check out. If you like cannabis, they've got that too, but there's so many things to do on the grounds, and it's just beautiful. And he was like, I just felt like it was like a mashup of like the redwoods in Tuscany.
And we try. I think when we did this, when I had to convert the property to Madrone's property, I had a design business there for about 20 years or 15 to 20 years, and had to do it out of happenstance. It was not something I planned, so it was very organic how it came about. But what I kept thinking about, because I kept thinking about these agriturismos that I stayed in Italy, and the property I designed, had very strong Mediterranean architecture and full-grown olive trees and surrounded by vineyards. And so I thought, wouldn't it be nice, because we could do something like that, and it's also kind of low-touch service, which actually would be nice on me, as well as a guest. And it's been really rewarding for us, even before we brought the cannabis element onto it, is to be able to actually have people that come up a little bit tightly wound from the city and really unwind. We're in an area that basically, it's not very commercial. It's still a very authentic working community. And there's lots of stuff to go out and venture out, especially a lot of nature and also a lot of good wine tasting. We're only about 13 miles as a crow flies from the coast too. Yeah. So it's just, it's restorative. So I appreciate hearing that, because that you kind of hit the nail on the head about what we enjoy about what we're doing, is be able to give people that opportunity and maybe give them a chance to reset a little bit. And we're not that much further than some of the other more popular locations from San Francisco, so.
And you forgot to add in English Garden. And then we have you forgot 2 countries. There's also a strong Asian influence in a lot of the things that we do. We're all over the place. Yeah. It's like Epcot or something.
Well, anyway, it's not like Epcot.
Do you speak Esperanto there too?
I used to work at Walt Disney World. So anyway, yeah, Jim got arrested there. I worked there. But anyway.
I like that. It's like the spectrum.
Right. Good cop, bad cop, always, still.
But what you say is really true. When we have 2 properties that are kind of right next to each other, there's a small campground that's between the 2 properties where people can also stay, but still use the amenities on our properties. And at the Madrone's property, you've got all the conveniences. So there's the tasting room there, the 2 tasting rooms, which are Long Meadow Ranch and Wentworth Vineyards now. We've got our herbal apothecary, which is the Bohemian Chemist, and we have our restaurant, which is Wixon. And then Jim's old house, which is the cottage that we have on that property, we converted into guest accommodations. Basically what happened is I would get up in the morning and I would look out our window and I'm like, Jim, there's people that are playing Frisbee in our yard again. Because as the other part of the property became a public place, people were just naturally curious about what was on the other kind of side of this garden. Yeah. So after that happened, it's like, we've got to get out of here. We've got to build a house somewhere else. So we converted all those units into, we converted his home into units. And all the units are named after what they were when it was our home. So the living room used to be our living room. The kitchen used to be our kitchen, etc. And then it was about 2015 when I became interested in the Brambles property.
Next door.
And it's totally different. It's a redwood forest where people can go. And like you said, when you stay at the Brambles, you really feel like you've got this huge, majestic redwood forest all to yourself, And since then, we've started to do some weddings. We've put some decks on stumps down there, which is really cool. So anyway, it's exciting.
I think it's a good template for others, So we kind of we're pioneering something, especially with the cannabis element on it. But I think that this is a really good template. We would love to see other folks doing properties that are like this and taking kind of a fresh approach, creative approach to it. And it's always nice when you have people come and visit, and it's almost disorienting, that they basically say, okay, where am I? What am I doing? Wait, I don't get this. But they're so curious. They keep going further and further down the rabbit hole on it. So I think that's been kind of a fun thing to build into it. But I think you're right, though. Cannabis tourism has a really promising future. I mean, it's going to be, the wine vacation that we had, back in the 70s, or that whole development of the wine industry. The cannabis industry is going to go the same way.
Elevate your brand with iSpire, the global leader in vape technology with over 1,000 patents worldwide. Our innovative iSpire 1 simplifies your process with self-sealing hardware and automated filling. No capping, no hassle. For brands ready to go to market, our iSpire signature devices are for premium, customizable solutions. And as proud members of NCAA, NORML, the Origins Council, and the Women's Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, iSpire is committed to advocacy and social justice. Learn more today at getispire.com.
Yeah, and being on the property, you're able to. There were so many opportunities to be outside, and be in a beautiful space and be able to consume cannabis if you wanted to. What I liked was that for people who don't consume, there's no smoking in the room, so you don't have to worry. Like people, those of you listening out there thinking that the rooms are going to smell thick and dank of weed smoke when you walk in, you would be wrong. Your friend or spouse or whomever, special friend who does not consume will not be put out. by the rooms. They're very comfortable and well appointed. And there are beautiful spaces to be able to be outside and consume if you want. And you know, one of the hardest things is being able to have events with people where consumption is involved because of just the restrictions that there are. Or even like I used to throw different parties, and to find a space to be able to do it, people would be always worried, like, oh, I don't know, you know, I don't know if I want you guys here. Like, what's it going to be like? And then when we'd be done, they'd be like, wow, everyone was so nice and neat. And my bathrooms aren't trashed. You can come back whenever you want.
It is interesting when we have weddings. Like the weed smokers, they're usually all like tired and done by like 10 or 10:30 and everything. And everyone's just in a great mood. And it's some of the folks that are the alcohol users that tend to be a little more abusive to the property. That's very true. So,
right.
We get everything kind of wrapped up, you know. They may not know how to turn on their shower, but other than that, it's like it's all good.
That's easily remedied. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that because, you know, you get, and don't get me wrong, like I love a glass of wine or a good craft cocktail every now and then. But when drinking's in the picture, that's when things get rowdy and things go late and, you know, there can be some mess that's involved. Whereas if it's a cannabis related event, everybody is out the door by midnight. Everyone wants to go home. And if you don't have snacks, they're definitely heading out early.
Yeah. And we kind of, you know, we've been pushing the envelope too. You know, we had, like I said, it's nice seeing cannabis farmers markets. Unfortunately, right now, you know, there's some legislation that's trying to go through right now to actually get farmers to be able to directly sell at an event. And I think that would be great when that happens. But in the meantime, we set up in a similar format. But pushing the envelope with cannabis farmers markets, the live auction, infused dinners. We have a cannabis club. You know, we had the DCC come and visit us, and he said, "Well, I read an article on MJ Biz about you guys, and you guys got this like cannabis club. What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm just shipping it by UPS." And he turned white. He's like, "Oh my God!" You know, "No, you're not." I said, "No, I'm not." But I think it's, but everything that we're doing, he asked me about all these things that we're doing. And for us, it's kind of, we're not wanting to break rules, but we're wanting to basically push the envelope to see where we can go. And I think that DCC also is like, okay, let me take that back to legal. And they're like, oh, I don't know what to think about that, because they're still feeling it out too.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is just normalize it, you know? So we want to have these like activations that just make everything feel kind of normal, you know? And, so that's been a really interesting route for us to go, you know? So
even at the weddings, our bud tender, Keela, once again, will go down and do some of he'll bud tend at weddings. So there's both alcohol and cannabis at some of our weddings. And
private events.
Private events, yeah, exactly. But to see cannabis normalized and used, you know, in this multi-generational celebration in a very normal way is really exciting. Yeah. It's really demonstrating the fact that it really has come a long way from, you know, when I first started using cannabis, you know, in Key West, and was, you know, paranoid that someone was going to come arrest me or something. Yeah.
And it's nice that what we do is actually he'll go through and he has like kind of a waiver form. And then he really takes enough time to talk to people about it, because you get into an event and you haven't seen folks for a long time, and it's kind of like, okay, let's burn the candle at both ends. Well, we don't want that to happen. So we really want things to be measured and people to have a really good time and to really watch their consumption, so that everybody has a good time. So anyway, those things are all very, very important to us. I think the only way that we can really walk forward in a good way with this new industry that's emerging is for us to do it with responsibility and education and openness, you know, to, you know, knowing how people are going to respond to things, and just making sure people start to understand their endocannabinoid system and their metabolism and all that, and partake in a very good way, you know. So I think that's on all of us in the industry. Not all of us maybe are doing that, but a lot of folks are. But we find that very, very important, you know. So
I think managing through education to create successful outcomes brings better conversations. And when I look at the DCC, I see a group of people who care very deeply, that want to make sure that things turn out the way they should, but their hands are tied by a lot of legislation. So when people get down on them, I'm like, well, here's the thing. You know, you can yell about them. You can yell about the dispensaries. You can yell about the brands, but it's not any of our issues. The issues are that the people that, you know, depend on our votes to keep their jobs don't necessarily understand what good policy is around cannabis, because the DCC is just upholding the policies that are there. I mean, even when I'm in oversight meetings and it's like, well, you know, for my medicinal subcommittee that I'm chair of, like, what do you want to talk about? I want to talk taxation. Let's talk about taxation and how expensive everything is. And they're like, well, it's not in our purview. And it's a very frustrating thing to hear. And it's also very true. You know, some of the biggest frustrations that we're dealing with, the biggest roadblocks, whether they're in the DCC's purview to uphold or not, is not in their purview or to be able to control.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so
I was good.
So I sit on a task force for Cal OSBA. Cal OSBA is actually under GoBiz, so it's part of the governor's office. I was selected and then nominated and then vetted and then approved by the governor. So I'm one of 34 people, but they chose me because of my cannabis background and also being in a rural community and understanding the challenges of running a business in a rural community. So Cal OSBA is actually the advocate for 4.2 million small businesses throughout the state. And as a task force, we've been brought together to actually see what we can do to actually create better resources and access for capital and all those things. The cannabis one is really challenging with the environment that we're in right now. You know, I'm also sitting on the board for one of the oldest women's business centers, which is another nonprofit, but now also serves all the community outside just women. And we help with SBA funding, and we actually do things as far as technical assistance and training and mentorship and really good work, you know. But with cannabis, you can't, since there's federal dollars involved, you know, you don't have that access, you know, for a lot of those folks. So that's just been really challenging. But now with my little bit of, you know, getting my feet wet in the government, you're right when you say it's not what's already there as far as legislation or regulation. It's in the hands of people to actually make this better, because California's had such a clumsy, to put it mildly, a clumsy rollout of this, you know, and it's caused so much deep pain and so much injustice in the way it's been done. I don't think that wasn't its intention, but that is what's happened. Mm-hmm. And it's up to us to go out and actually get our lawmakers actually on board. And they don't understand. I mean, even right now with what's going on with hemp, I think, you know, they don't really understand how these cannabinoids work. I mean, we're still figuring it out. And, you know, it's just, I see a lot of people in the space that are trying to do a good thing, but really don't have any of the knowledge or experience of knowing the plant that are making these decisions. And I think it's up to us to let our voices be heard. So we need to actually help educate them.
Yeah.
And I want to just add, like, our experience with the DCC has been overwhelmingly positive when we have thrown out these things that they don't quite know whether or not we can do it. Our experience with them has been a culture of yes, like let us work with you to figure out how you can do what you want to do within the regulations that we've been given. And it would be the easiest thing in the world for them to just be like, no, you're not going to do that. No. And then they're done. They don't have to think about it anymore. It's the problem is solved. And that hasn't been how they've been. They've been like, okay, let's think creatively about this because this is a great idea, but these are the regulations. What can we do to make this happen in a legal way? Yeah. So it's been positive.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like they do want to have this be a success. It's just that in many ways their hands are tied, and it really is, it's up to us, because when we are looking at policy, the people who are whispering in the lawmakers' ears, like, you know, up close and personal, it doesn't necessarily have to do with how it serves the public or the greater industry. There's a lot of individual interests that are coming into play, and it doesn't necessarily help everyone.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think, you know, there's a lot of movements that are going on right now. One is the D2C, which is direct to consumer. And there's been some grassroots kind of organizations that have started up, and then others that are actually more formulated, that are nonprofits that have been working within the sector to actually help move this along. But it's, I think, you have to be leery about just how people come in and what their motivations are. And, you know, a lot of times it's very self-serving. It may be branded in a thing of helping a bunch of group people or a lot of small farmers or that sort of thing. But it may just, when it boils down to it, only help them because of an advantage they have, whether it's a micro business license or something. So, which is what we have, which we're very fortunate to. But a lot of farmers can't do what we do because they don't have the licensing that we have and they're unable to get it. That's, to me, what needs to be done more than anything else, is to actually make sure that those small farmers they need a leg up. They were promised a leg up. They were not given a leg up.
Yep.
And they were given really the opposite. And I think at this point right now, there's got to be some justice there. There's got to actually, and I think the state has recognized that, but their solutions, they kind of go about it in the wrong way, you know, as far as actually trying to solve it. So it's gonna be up to us, you know. And I think right now what's sad is that there's a lot of weariness out there. I mean, it's just been such a battle that I see a lot of small farmers that are just very weary with very little resources. And so anyway, I think for your folks and your listeners out there, anything you can do is actually know your farmer and actually, you know their medicine, know how they grow their plants, know their story. Know what they value as far as what they're growing and what they think is important about what they're growing. Because most of them are not in it. They want to make a living, but they're not in it for a green rush. They've been doing this for a long time, and they really they're just passionate. Once you get this plant hooks you, and once you're there, you know, you're just very passionate about it, and the intentions are good. So I think, and their product's going to be good, you know, because they put a lot of care into it, and it's organic and it's sun grown, and it's done in a manner that's very very well done, you know, and also pay attention, like you mentioned earlier, to terroir too. So I think there's so much to be said about that also.
Yeah, and it'd be great if your consumers could go into some dispensaries and ask specifically for, you know, sun-grown cannabis that comes from a smaller farmer, you know, in the Emerald Triangle. We're only going to be able to have our products in those places if there's a demand, you know, from the consumers to do that. And they should, people should have choices. And clearly, if you prefer indoor from a mass grow, you know, you should be able to smoke that. But I would encourage folks to just give sun-grown a try. Just give some of these smaller brands a try, because they're the people that have really held the industry together.
And we're firm believers that the plant doesn't reach its full potential unless it's exposed to all the elements, you know. So, and they found this out in grape growing, you know. So now they're actually pushing the envelope. We have vintners here that are actually growing closer and closer to the ocean and dry farming and doing things that actually really challenge the plant in a lot of ways. And I think, you know, when you're in an environment like this, you know, we understand that once that plant is challenged or put into a natural environment where it's going to have to deal with wind and it's going to have to deal with all these different things, that it's going to really reach its potential. It's really going to turn out to be something very special. And it's hard to reproduce that in a controlled environment. So I don't want to get down on that, but that's something to consider, because the narrative is completely on the other side. And I would challenge people to maybe even just try to give it a chance, because the terpenes and everything is just, it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's room for both. And I think that there is and there's artistry in both as well. But if you've not tried sun-grown cannabis, you're missing out.
Right. You know, Sarah, one of the other things that we're doing too, I think I talked to you a little bit about it in the past, so is that, you know, we are working with scientists, and we are kind of closely working with also the medical community. And, you know, the morphology of the plant, which is kind of indica sativa hybrid, that's really talking about the morphology of the plant, but not really the effects that you're going to necessarily
Explain morphology.
Well, I mean, the structure, you know, sativas will have like thin leaves typically and have a certain growth pattern and bud structure, that sort of thing. And indicas will be different. But you can have an indica that really has pretty much of a sativa effect and vice versa. And I think that, you know, so we have a group that's actually been mapping our terpenes on our property and our farm.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And they've actually done over 30,000 cultivars, I think. And they've mapped hundreds of farms. And our farm, along with a couple others, was very different in the terpene clusters that we were actually producing with our flower. We're doing the terpene clusters that are getting lost in the market. So everything's kind of leaning towards the limonene, kind of basis, and pinene and terpinolene and some of these other terpenes are actually just really kind of disappearing. And so I think that's another interesting thing too, is that I think that it shows you just how this overbreeding is actually kind of gone to a single thing and it's lost all these other things in the process. So, but it's really cool. What they're doing is that our COAs can go in, then they color code everything. And this is called Discover Your Own Color. And actually, it's not about saying, it is kind of linked similar to a sativa, indica, and dominant. But at the same time, it really, it's not saying that just because this maybe goes into, you like sativas, this goes into a sativa category, but your metabolism is going to be different. So it's more about understanding these colors that have been mapped and gone through an algorithm that should have possibly these type of effects, and they pretty much mirror what we think of as sativa, indica, and hybrid. But you need to maybe go through and say, I like Blue Dream, and you go through and you actually find one that's actually in the Blue Dream color category. And then you could say, I think I'm going to try some other flower that's in this category. This is what I really respond to. And all this data has been actually studied and then thrown into an algorithm and a program that actually categorizes it. So I think it's a first step, one of the first steps. It is going to continue to change, but as we learn more, but I think it's a great way. So we're going to be color coding all of the flower that we're doing. We're trying to get other retailers to do the same thing and farmers to actually bring on this model and see if we can have a little bit better information for folks that are actually consuming to make better choices.
I think that's great because we, as we start to learn more, there is a need for a new lexicon, but it also needs to be accessible to the general public. Because you pull out a word like chemotype to somebody and they're like, oh, you're getting too fancy on it. Whereas the three of us are all like, oh,
yeah.
What you throwing out there? What's going to be in that, But it is, because when we do use, indica, sativa hybrid, that's already a lot for somebody to, digest. But then you start saying, well, honestly, with everything, unless you're like collecting old land races, everything's a hybrid. So we're using that to illustrate the spectrum of feel. And they're like, okay, well, what the heck does that mean? It's like, how do we create this safe container for experimentation so that people can figure out what works well for them with these crazy chemistry experiments that, we have that we're walking around in?
Yeah.
Because
I think this is a really simple way to start that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people to track their experiences. Cause I have to say, like you were saying, we have a general idea of how the majority of the population respond to certain combinations in cannabis. But then you always get those really interesting anomalies. And I always lean in. I'm like, oh, tell me more. Like, what else do you have different reactions to and what's going on? And especially because, brain chemistry has a lot to do with it. Like, I remember when I used to work in a shop and, people who had were dealing with ADHD, people, we all have, I guess, our own versions of neurodivergence, but people, be like, oh, I have ADHD and these sativas are really calming for me and I use them I'm like, see, for me, that would have me, curled up in fetal position and anxious, but, hey, this is fascinating. What else? How do you react, differently to other things? And kind of learning about that so we can help everybody find a good fit. And also having the conversation that, even though we create our own endogenous cannabinoids, not all of us do well with phytocannabinoids, and that's okay. So that there's not, because a lot of times people tend to demonize things that don't work well for them, whether it's just, how we're conditioned to look at things, or they just don't want to be left out of the conversation. And
I think those with what you're saying too, like you talk about the sativas, but then if you have a sativa that we've had a couple that show quite a bit of CBG that's in them too. So if they're going from 2 to 5% CBG along with the THC, we'll have folks that are actually, oh no, I just smoke indicas and just sativas are going to make me really paranoid or jittery. and then they smoke it and they're like, oh my gosh, I had so much fun. I was giggling. I didn't feel any of that. So that's why we concentrate a lot on the minors too, and CBC you mentioned earlier, that's one we're really interested in. It's so elusive. It's really difficult to get in type of measurable amount into a plant, but we have some old land races that we keep breeding and we're finding some outliers, and then we can rebreed these outliers that have CBC in them and hoping that we're going to come up with a cultivar that actually has some measure. And we're finding small measurable amounts almost in everything we're doing now.
That's cool.
Brian in particular is interested in it because I think it has a euphoric effect. I think that in combination with THC, there's a bit of euphoria that comes with it. So I think a lot of these old cultivars that had CBC in it, like some of the reds down in Colombia and that sort of thing, would have some CBC in them. Also some South Indian ones do too. But we were talking to a scientist and they said, yeah, there's a study that's been done and it's almost 10 times more effective than an SSRI, for depression. So anyway, it's interesting, but I think having these presence of these other things that people are not even looking at can have a profound effect on what you're going to experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would just add too, like I have ADD. I don't have the H part, but I do have ADD. And we have a THCV, both pre-roll and a card that is super focusing for me. It really allows me to really focus and get work done, and the distractions and everything that go through my mind while I'm trying to do a certain task are really eliminated. And I feel like it's
functional.
It's functional, and there's not a bad residual effect from it after you're done. And to me, it's just, I don't know, like I was on Adderall for a long time and just feel like it's such a dirty drug in a lot of ways, you know what I mean? And this was just more effective for me. So
we have our own cultivar called Weederall. So anyway,
sign me up. I'm into that. Well, I mean, it's like I use CBG and THCV when I get analysis paralysis because my brain works so fast, and sometimes there's so many things going on at once that I just like freeze.
Yeah.
And if I am able to do that, especially like doing the combo of the two, give myself a couple minutes, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, so what's on my list? What do I have to do now? But it's not distracting like too much THC would be for me during the day. And as much as I love CBD, because I tend to be, I don't know, I think I probably have a little bit of I was told that it probably isn't anxiety, it's probably ADD and I should get checked. But, but CBD, I love it to calm me down, but that one sometimes makes me a little forgetful. Even though it's not getting me high, it kind of gets me a little like, oh, yeah, okay.
Which is really difficult when you're mid-sentence and you forget what you were talking about. That's happened to me on CBD before.
Yeah. Yeah. Or trying to write, or, I mean, it's fine if you're like in creative flow and you're just going and it's like whatever happens. But, unless you're like a full-time artist, like how much time are you actually spending in that kind of flow?
Right. I would add too that one of the most interesting things that I've heard about in terms of cannabis is one thing that cannabis helps you do is helps you forget. And in the mental health world, forgetting is so important. We have these traumatic experiences that happen to us, and they're cemented in our mind. And then we react to other stimuli based on this traumatic experience, where we have this framework we've created. And CBD and cannabis really allows you to forget some of that trauma. Yeah. And forgetting is so important to us. So it's sad to me.
Especially in an information age where we have so much coming out after us, you know what I mean? So being able to partake in a little bit of cannabis at the end of the day or whatever, that actually will help you kind of let go of some of those things, because we're just... our minds to try to edit everything. We're getting text messages. We're getting PM'd. We're actually getting, we're getting phone calls. We're getting all these things, emails. There's just so much coming out after us all the time. And I think cannabis is a really good way to actually kind of let go of some of that and for your mental health. well. So, but the THCV has really also helped me too. I was my pediatrician wanted to put me on Ritalin, so I definitely have that propensity too. I'm an amazing achiever, but I just funneled it into being a workaholic in some ways. But it's that THCV is really pretty powerful. So we've been trying to push up the percentages. So we've got cultivars that are about 8%, and then about another 8% of the THC. And then when we do our carts, it comes in at like 34, 36%. I think even mine, and I'm trying to get minor amounts of that back into some of these older cultivars that I think maybe had that originally, and actually has lost it along the way. So,
and you feature a lot of those cultivars in your club boxes, correct? And I mean, we've talked about that, but I don't think we've let our listeners know what they are and how they can take part. And I've seen the mock-up of the boxes, and they're just gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah. So we only have 3 drops a year. We put this in mind that we'd be able to get it anywhere in California. That's becoming a little bit troublesome. Every company that we went for that we were going to partnership with has gone out of business with this environment that we've had. But we're going to figure out a way to do that. But so there's 3 drops, and it's just a collection. We have our Harvest Moon, which is actually done right after our harvest that we have in the fall. More towards like November, December. And then we have our Alchemist box that comes out kind of mid-spring, and that actually will have some of our stuff that's more medicinal, that basically has more of that focus to it. And then now we're coming out with our summer solstice box, and that's going to have just some of our popular ones, the ones that actually are, and a few new ones that we've released, but ones that are just kind of abundance type of thing, the ones that people really like and they're very popular. And so it's very much like a wine club. And that's kind of, when we first started the Chemist, that was part of our business model because we had tasting rooms there, and it was very much part of it like a wine club. So, yeah.
And we're lucky enough. So, I mean, our intention was to be able to drop these directly to people. That's not going to be possible right now. We're working on it. But we're blessed enough that we have a hotel. And so we do have these Cannabis Club weekends. They're the 3rd weekend of every month. 3 times a year, if you're a Cannabis Club member, you get a discount on your room. You can come up. One of the big highlights for folks when they come up and visit us is actually the Cannabis Farm Tour. And so we bring them up here to Sugar Hill Farm. We take them down in our cannabis garden. And towards September and October, people are just blown away because our plants get to be 12 to 16 feet tall. I mean, they're monsters. I just can't believe how this plant can grow and how big it can get.
Annually.
Yeah. You're almost going through like a cannabis maze. It's
right.
Because it's
the labyrinth.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, and for those of you who have not gone to a grow, there is nothing like it. And to go up on the hill where these guys are is magical. Looking to grow your cannabis business and expand your network? Join the National Association of Cannabis Businesses for just $50 a month and unlock exclusive access to new commercial opportunities and clients across the industry. Enjoy special discounts, free advertising, and access to members-only content. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, NACB tailors its memberships to propel you forward. Visit nacb.com now and join the leading community dedicated to cannabis business excellence.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, but I think that's a good way for us to spotlight those boxes. That's a great way for us to spotlight some of these ones that people maybe would normally not pick up. So. Black African Magic was the one that we started a few years ago, and a friend of ours actually took it from a seed vault, got the seeds from a Rastafarian in Africa when he's coming back from the Seychelles, and this is kind of a mythical, who knows if it's even Black African Magic or not, but it's special. The effects are special. The way it grows is very special, and it's been so well received. So that's one that we've been working with, and we found CBC in it. So I keep reading it every year and picking the outliers. We do very early veg testing with scientists that we can get a snapshot of what we're going to get at harvest at about 69 days or so.
Wow.
And we take the top 2 nodes, and then they can do a full profile on that. And then we'll even get to the point where we continue to look at that and see how it's progressing in the plant. I really want to understand better the cannabinoid development, and these minors get pushed out very easily when they don't have they're not on an even playing field with the majors. So if you have a minor that's really kind of challenging a major and it's running about the same, like maybe a 1% or 2% or something like that early on, then you know that that's probably going to have a presence, at finish. So, so that's some of the things that we're doing that, we're taking, and we're really working sometimes within lines. We're not even just breeding and crossbreeding and stuff. We'll work within a line and just find outliers, these unicorns that we can say this one's very special, and let's take this, and we find another female that's very special, and we'll breed them with the males. And it's been interesting. Now this year I went ahead and ran the panels on a bunch of the Black African Magic that I found CBC in, and they all have CBC now. So it's like, wow, we're stabilizing this a little bit in the plant, and then what can we do with it next? We also bred it to our Hedonia, which actually has a large percentage of CBG in it too, along with THC. And we've got kind of like a 3-1-1, as far as on the percentage ratios. So anyway, very exciting stuff. But it's good to get it in hands, because most people would be just like, oh, what is this? I don't get it. I don't want to do it. And I want to gravitate towards what I know. And especially people that are really entrenched in the industry too. We just say, come on, try it. Mix up your endocannabinoid system. Try something different. I mean, you're in a rut. Of course, you're not getting satisfied with what you're getting now out of the plants that you keep smoking. So try some of these ones that have minors in it, have different terpene profiles, and just mix it up a little bit. Super important.
The impression that it has on your body, it's like, it's amazing. And I think people do get caught in their ruts, and they have their favorites that they enjoy, but then you do get to a point where your body adapts, because we're incredibly adaptable, and you don't get the same impression. And to try, different spectrums with flowers and to mix it up is really important if you're looking to use it, in your daily use, because otherwise it just becomes really flat. For people, I could talk to you all day. You guys are awesome. And, we definitely have to do this again. We have so much more to discuss, because I really would love to get more into the science and all the really interesting things that you're doing with research. But for people who want to come up and visit and experience the dispensary, and, either like visit the Madrones or come stay. And for those of you out there, really like staying at the Madrones or the Brambles is a very unique, magical experience. And if you are in California, you should have been there already. And if you're not, you should plan a trip. But for people to be able to follow you or reach out, how can they do that?
Sure. So the madrones.com will actually be our site that you can find the hotel and everything it offers there, and reservations. We're also on Instagram at the Madrones, and then the Bohemian Chemist actually has its own website, and then we're also on Instagram there too. And the Brambles even has its own website too. The Brambles is kind of our event property, so we're going to be really kind of going a little bit more into retreats and stuff. We're kind of going to be mixing it up, so maybe the next time that we do talk, we'll have a little bit different kind of platform of what we're doing. But I think we're seeing that a lot of our travelers want kind of a curated experience. So we're going to try to start doing some weekends that are maybe focusing in on health and wellness, or some other things. We did a mushroom foraging with a truffle hunting dog this last winter, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, those are the best places to reach us on any of those. Yeah.
Yeah. And our dispensary is, it's open every day.
Yeah.
So if you are a cannabis connoisseur or very interested in cannabis tourism specifically, the third weekend of the month, as I've mentioned, is the activation event. So we have the cannabis tour on Saturday, the dining in our consumption lounge on Saturday night, and then Sunday we have the farmers markets. So it's a fun experience, a way to really immerse yourself in the cannabis culture of Mendocino on those third weekends. But you can come up here any weekend, and Keela can offer you some amazing flower or some amazing edibles and tips on what you can do to really enjoy your experience. And so you're welcome to use cannabis anytime on our property. So not just
and then we're in about 30 plus retailers throughout the state too. So our product is, those retail partnerships are super important for us. And it's also a way, like next week, we're going to be on the road about 1 week a month. We're on the road. We do brand education. So we go in and we actually meet with sales staff and bud tenders and that sort of thing. And then we'll do activations too, where we can talk to the public. That's been really rewarding for us, because we're finding an older demographic in a lot of these communities too that's coming out, and just to listen to what their needs are and to really talk to someone one-on-one. So I think for us to get out in the public across the state is super important. I mean, we only have so much bandwidth, but it's just, we always come back with something. We're always saying, gosh, that was really profound, talking to that man or that woman that had this or that, and why they're maybe just doing edibles, or, why they're not smoking, and it's and what they're trying to get out of their medicine. So that's so we're all over the place.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Our ADD is really firing.
Hey, you've got enough stuff to keep both your minds busy.
Exactly. Sara, we want you and Jeff to come up and visit us again soon.
Yeah.
We
really
would love that.
adore you guys, and it's so much fun to hang out with you. So, yeah.
Yeah.
We love the old Grateful Dead stories too.
Right. It's always a joy to talk with you guys. And if we had some wine and some joints now, we could make this a marathon episode. Next time, for sure. And for those of you listening out there, really, it's a beautiful place to visit. Check it out. Keep an eye, if you're in California, keep an eye out for their products. And if you don't see them in dispensaries, you should ask for them. They are amazing for the seasoned connoisseur down to the kind of curious. And going to the Bohemian Chemist, if you are somebody who is a seasoned connoisseur and your traveling partner is not, they are very gentle and very educational, and it will be an all-around wonderful, magical experience. Thank you both. Thank you for being on the show today, and we will definitely do this again.
Amazing.
Thank you.
And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Payan on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.